Hello, my name is Twisham, and welcome to my presentation called Experimental Archaeology and my experience doing it as an undergraduate student. I'm from Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan, India, and I will be presenting my topic based on the work I have done from past 1 year. So the following presentation is going to be divided into three parts. First part is going to be explaining the background of my work, how I came up with my research questions, and what are the plans and objectives regarding that. The second part will be explaining and justifying my work. I would like to explain why I'm calling this experimental archaeology and proving my work with verified sources and basically evidence for whatever the work I have been doing. And then finally, the last part, analyzing my work, the work that I have been doing since the past 1 year, um, where I will be explaining my project, what went wrong, why it went wrong, things to keep in mind while doing experimental archaeology, do's and don'ts. Um, so what happens to things underground and why? That's the um, that's the research question I'm going for today. It's been a research question since I started the project, and it came to me slowly while thinking about various random stuffs. And so basically, coming up with a research question was pretty random while looking out the window one day. And the curiosity to delve into a practical project and looking at its various factors of affecting the soils, geological sciences, etc., and uh, looking at its stratigraphy was kind of important and interesting to me. Uh, Moving on to aims and objectives, looking into site formation processes, analyzing how soil deposition affect articles underground, and study decay and movement of chemical elements. Basically, very understandable. Three simple aims and objectives, very practical in nature, and pretty much based around the fact that I wanted to do something that is much more insightful to me personally, into giving me some more practical experience of doing field work. Uh, you know, like a practical experience into looking into various chemical elements going on inside the soil, looking into the stratigraphy, looking into decay, deposition, and most importantly, site formation process. Moving on, so we move on to the next part on why am I calling this experimental archaeology, and just all in all, proving my sources to prove my point. So I am going to put forth my opinion on this matter through some sources. The number one source is like Experimental Archaeology by John M. Coles. Uh, he points out various problems associated with doing the authentic form of experimental archaeology, which warns you obviously from doing anything that's going to steer away your work from the authentic way of doing the work. Conceptual examples throughout Europe of experimental archaeology being done by organizations which are mostly about farming. Farming experiments are very popular experiments. Uh, just like he points out to be the don'ts in experimental archaeology, he also has a few suggestions on what must be done in order for things to be done right and how to obtain meaningful and insightful results. So, second source is Introduction to Experimental Archaeology by Alan Caltram. And this is one more basic source about studying the matter, and importantly, he fundamentally puts forth defining experimental archaeology and its values and other delimiters to the subfield. Uh, it's just much more detailed explanation than John M. Coles, who also very much puts forth like the important and most basic definitions of experimental archaeology and its features. He puts forth arguments about a little bit of a debate about where experimental archaeology belongs in the subfields of archaeology, whether it's pure archaeology or does it fall into the subfield of archaeological sciences. He also puts for do's and don'ts in experimental archaeology, but it's much more of how to start and what to not do and what to do in a much more direct way than John M. Coles. He also refers to John Coles in his work a number of times, which is important. Second, coming to experimental archaeology, but when we talk about it in within the context of Indian archaeology, we have to keep in mind a few more sources, and we have to keep in mind that we are in an extremely different region with extremely different regional features and many other things. Um, so, what exactly do we have as resources and how exactly they are reliable? We have to keep in mind that Indian archaeology is heavily dependent on literature and it's much more influenced by it. It's about 60% literature and 40% archaeological sources in Indian archaeology and Indian history overall. Um, so, things we are also looking at is, you know, we should come to the geographical description of my work area specifically, which is the district of Birbhum, with a laterite. It's a laterite region full of soil which is very sufficient in iron, making it red in color and almost a bit sandy in nature. We are going to be looking at up to 20 kilometers in all directions from my university, which is about surrounded by a river system on both sides. We would be looking into soil, ethnographic studies, local archaeological sites, past work done in the area, and most importantly, observing the climatic changes throughout time. Climate change is a very important factor in doing experimental archaeology, which will be discussed later. This is the region that we are going to be looking at. Just to make it clear, there is a river running down south of the township, and there is about one or two rivers running north of the university. It's a Duab kind of a region, which is basically a piece of land with rivers on both of its sides, making it a promising region for various things. So, due to it being an example of Indian archaeology, we are going to be looking at primarily ceramics and pottery as it forms one of the most important factors in Indian archaeology. We will be putting ceramics as our primary object of uh, importance in the experiment since it's very rare to see experimental archaeology being done on India ceramics in the context of Indian archaeology. It has been done, but it's pretty rare. So this is a very important source, a book on ethnographic studies done in the state of West Bengal in India, based on ceramics uh, by Dr. Sharmi Chakraborty, and um, it's greatly important if you want to know about ceramics and its information in India. Lays out an elaborate ethnographic study of Bengal's contemporary ceramic industry, insights of centers of pottery manufacturing and its typologies. We are going to be using this book to analyze and keep in consideration of manufacturing centers in proximity to the town of Shantiniketan. So, coming to how do you approach experimental archaeology in such a setting where literature plays such a most important role with a completely different surroundings and a completely very different way of doing things than in Europe or say America. So it's important to maintain the standards of heritage and understanding context of the environment in which you plan to do experimental archaeology. Just a thing to go ahead with. So Um, so what have I been doing and what happened of it? What's next? So, like, finally coming to the work I have been doing, the case study done in urban. Just a second. Yeah, right. Case study done in an urban setting consisting of a trench with multiple objectives, which is stratigraphic analysis, creating an artificial cultural layer, and analyzing effects on test objects over different periods of time. Once again, as discussed earlier, we are going to be looking at stratigraphy, a first hand and a practical look at the stratigraphy. We are going to be looking at chemical elements, their exchanges, and we are going to be doing it through creation of an artificial cultural layer on multiple dual as evident here. We have done it on two different levels, but it can be more or less. You can just do with one level, we can do with two levels, we can do with multiple levels. Next is so basically what happened here was I took a one by one trench, 1 meters by 1 meters in a courtyard garden setup. It's the courtyard garden of someone's house. The trench was excavated up to 14 inches, about 35 centimeters deep, granting us a very good amount of significant stratigraphic data. It was good only in terms of understanding as an undergraduate student. It was very helpful and other looking at, except like it is not really much helpful if you're looking into a whole very professionally, but you get the point. Just a second, right? So stratigraphic analysis observations made from the given stratigraphy is as follows. So up to 10 centimeter, 25.4 centimeters, 10 inches. The layer was full of rock, brick, and tile shards. It was the problem this creates will be discussed later. From 3 inches, a large root of a tree protrudes a nearby coconut tree. More roots followed up until the 13 inches of depth. Roots were of the same coconut tree. The rock content decreases from 11 inches onwards, but pretty much continues. Small amounts of rock shards pretty much continue till the full depth of 14 inches. So just a second. So here we can see the stratigraphy. You can see the different layers. It's not very clear. Obviously, there has been a deficient amount of methodology here. The work is not perfect. Once again, I did this for my own personal understanding, which helped me to understand the basic ideas of stratigraphy. But it is also very interesting to see the stratigraphy at on what is there at which level. This is pretty much about, I think this is pretty much about 11 inches in depth. I went 3 inches more deeper than this. So analyzing the layer, the stratigraphy gives us, so two earthen pots and a dog figurine were used to create the first layer. At 10 inches, um, animal carcass parts, which is basically goat parts, animal remains, were placed at the second cultural layer. Um, these took place at 14 and 10 inches of depth, respectively. Um, I did not actually attempt to create a Harris matrix layer. This is just a diagram kind of to understand the layers, layer by layer, what was there at which layer. These are the two pictures of the two cultural layers for more better understanding. There are jaws there, intestines, eyeballs, fish parts on the southern end. There's the goat tails. On the left hand side, you can see two pots and a few rotten fruits that fell from the tree above. Pretty much, that's pretty much it is not important. The fruits are not important. The ones that are important are the earthen materials and the bone parts. The organic matter that will obviously be rotten in the soil will obviously create chemical elements to mix into the soil, enriching it more and more. It is worth also uh, observing that phenomenon. So what exactly happened and why did it happen? So the experiment obviously failed for obvious reasons, which is authentic methodologies were not performed properly. There were a bunch of factors that led to improper sourcing of material, starting from improper sources of materials, uh, non-natural anthropogenic factors, and other factors that resulted in it getting wrong. And all in all, I had to leave the project after 1 month of doing it. Unfortunate. So learning from failures obviously is important. We failed. I strive to do it better next time if I get an next opportunity to do it. It's called experimental archaeology for a reason. And experimental archaeology, improving methodologies, finding a more natural stratigraphy. Stratigraphy here was not natural, as evident from questioning from the house property owners. The land was resurfaced with rock shards and tile shards as shown before to level the land in order to construct a house. So the stratigraphy is definitely not natural, which makes it a bit problematic and almost very difficult to perform experimental archaeology using self-produced resources. The earthen pots and the clay dog were bought from the market, making it very non-authentic products. In order to authenticate it, should have made the clay pots and the dog myself. Will be keeping these things in mind, when doing next time. So uh, now that it's over, obviously, thank you for listening. And the most important part is feedbacks and suggestions. You can reach out to me at this email. It is very important to me to receive any kind of feedbacks and suggestions, any kind of help that you can provide. Um, as obviously I lack more sources, any information. Various sources are already logged behind paywalls of being in the UK University network. Many of them are locked behind membership fees and etc. Any information, any PDFs, any help you can provide, you can reach out to me here on my email, and even just a feedback or any suggestions to help me do my work properly. It will be greatly helpful, and hopefully I can publish my paper coming 2025. Thank you.